from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdes, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdes.
Hey, welcome in, everyone, to Rich's show. Dom Giordano, if you remember in the past, I think it's been about a year and a half since I've had the great honor of filling in. Now for Rich here, I'm out of Philadelphia on Talk Radio 1210. You reach me tonight at 833-482-5337 or 833, the number 4, Valdes. Good to be in for Rich, who's getting some vacation time. He'll be with you the next couple of nights. And again, it wasn't hard when I was asked on Friday to sit in for Rich to take a look down the road here. It's kind of gone a little bit faster than I thought. The finale, the tension really builds today in the Trump trial. And right out of Hollywood, Robert De Niro. And, De Niro is... I try to put aside a bit, but it's very difficult with De Niro, who has Trump derangement syndrome, comes to the courthouse today. This was the plan, the Biden plan. I don't think it was a good idea. I think the jurors probably saw this. I'm in the camp, and I'll lay it out tonight on Rich's show. We have great guests coming up, prime criminal defense attorney. I think there's going to be a hung jury here. I think there's no chance that Trump is going to be acquitted, zero. But I also think the chances are very slim that he's going to be found guilty. And the only question is, will it be 1, 2, or 3 jurors that will see it, that they haven't made the case, they haven't identified the second crime here in this trial? And that's critical because one person holding out, the pressure is going to be enormous. Say moving Thursday into Friday, if we're still there with the jury that can't decide, that's a sign it's a hung jury. There's no shot in New York with what's going on here, this kangaroo court, of Trump being acquitted. But I think the odds are also pretty long that he's going to be found guilty. I've seen projections. I don't share them, that this could go on for weeks. I don't see that happening. I think the judge is going to have his thumbs on the scale and his toes and everything, his head, to try to push the jury toward the majority, which will be 8-4, 9-3, something like that, 10-2, that say to convict Trump, let's get this over with, save democracy. So here's a little bit of De Niro today. And I think that De Niro has had 4 or 5 unbelievable roles, without a doubt. Don't think he's the best actor of the last X number of years. I don't even like him in Goodfellas, and I know almost every line of Goodfellas. But in Raging Bull, somewhat in Godfather 2, and the last 10 or 15 years, I wouldn't say he's washed up, but he's done a lot of things just to make money. And then he's become a public scold going after Trump. So he goes there today with a Biden spokesperson, and this was a tactical mistake. Do these jurors want to be told by Robert De Niro and others what the stakes are and how they have to convict or democracy is going to end? There was a heckler there that De Niro engaged with. It was like a scene out of a movie. Here's a little bit of De Niro in front of the courthouse.
I mean, this is really, even these people over here are it's kind of crazy. It's really crazy. And this thing, Donald Trump has created this. He should be telling them not to do this. But he's just... He wants to sow total chaos, which he's succeeding in some areas and places to do.
All right, there's a little bit of De Niro. There was heckling. A guy either set off a car alarm. It was blanking him out. Here's a little bit of the Biden spokesperson. Again, what is De Niro doing there? What is the Biden camp doing there? Making this political, as Trump's people have. We'll see if jurors see this, though, what they think about this spectacle of De Niro being there. Here's Michael Tyler, the Biden campaign spokesperson, today at a news conference outside there, saying we're not outside the courthouse because of the Trump trial.
We're not here today because of what's going on over there. We're here today because you all are here. And so we are proud. We are glad that you're all here this morning. We're here primarily because of the threat that Donald Trump poses to the United States of America and to our democracy.
All right, there we go. The threat to democracy. That's why we're here today. That's what this is all about. That's where we're going back to again. Now, you may have noticed, and I didn't see the exact finish time tonight. The judge went a little bit longer. With the prosecution, they weighed in much longer than the defense. And that's smart tactically. What they're trying to do is they're trying to show we had so much stuff on this guy, we could barely squeeze it in. They know deep down that a lot of this is about you don't want Trump. You want to stop Trump. And we are going to gerrymander in here any kind of law that we have to, any kind of spin to get to this point in the hopes that the jurors will be so hell-bent to stop Trump that they'll go along with this. Now, there are two attorneys on this jury, not in criminal law, and they're going to be critical because you would think one or two of them might lead ultimately when they get into the jury room. I think the high point of the defense today was talking about Michael Cohen as walking, talking, reasonable doubt. And when we get Attorney Rosenthal on with us tonight in a little bit, I'll ask him about reasonable doubt. What is reasonable doubt? Usually the defense has the upper hand. I've interviewed over my career 100 top prosecutors, defense attorneys, and others, and they all realize exactly what I'm telling you, that it comes down to, with the jury, how clever you are, how convincing around the issue of reasonable doubt. And the defense attorney today, Blanche, for Trump, went through 10 examples of reasonable doubt, any one of which would have said, we can't land on this. Now, will these jurors try to find a compromise and find Trump not guilty of 34 cases of anything but one somewhere here or there? All the Biden people want, all this is about, is to be able to say that Donald Trump is a convicted criminal. Donald Trump is a convicted felon. Now, the polling indicates that Trump is not going to, the new polling, he's not going to lose a lot of support. But I'm in the camp that thinks if he's a convicted felon, where I am in Philadelphia, the suburbs around Philadelphia are 1, 2, or 3, the most important area in the country. Whoever wins Pennsylvania, I think, is going to win the presidency. And they're a key to it. And you have any number of these quasi-Republicans who don't like Trump's personality. This could be a reason why they say, I can't vote for a convicted felon. How can I look my kids in the eye? So that's how close this is. It's all a game of inches. It's not wild stuff that suddenly people are going to turn on Trump. He's going to get support saying, look at what they're putting this guy through. It's possible, and the defense attorney today made this case that they immediately want to send Trump to prison. There are stories tonight that the Secret Service is preparing various prison spaces if it goes the way of convicting him. So that's what the stakes are. We are finally down there. If I had to project, I could see them finding on Friday one way or the other than getting out of Dodge. It certainly won't be tomorrow. Thursday's a push, but I could see Friday without a doubt. All right, here's how you get in. Love to know what you're thinking on this. It's 833-482-5337. That's 833, the number 4, Valdes, V-A-L-D-E-S. Dom Giordano pinch hitting. Coming up, your calls, and Nikki Haley is in Israel. What is she doing? Autographing bombs. Yes, that Nikki Haley. I'll explain here on at 833, the number 4, Valdes with Dom Giordano.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdes. America at Night with Rich Valdes.
That's exactly right. Happy to tell you, Dom Giordano, sitting in tonight from Philadelphia, Talk Radio 1210 for Rich. And you get in at 833-4-VALDEZ. Talking about what happened today, closing arguments. I wouldn't say it was as compelling. The De Niro stuff kind of blotted out everything today. It was nuts. And it's only going to ratchet up. You can feel the tension. And the more days the jury goes on, the more tension they're going to be under. And the after story of the jury of what pressure did they feel, two of them being attorneys, it's pretty hard to say. There's stories out there today that one of the jurors gets her news from Truth Social, indicative of a potential Trump person there listening to this. And again, they know it only takes one. But if it's one, they're going to be under incredible pressure in this. This is a huge political moment. The Biden people saying Joe Biden prepping to come from the White House after the verdict. It's going to be interesting what we say if there's a hung jury. All right, 833, the number 4-VALDEZ. Now, the other story that has my attention today, I've interviewed Nikki Haley in person over the years, and most recently in the last couple of years in person, 4 or 5 times, and then more times over the years. And she is polished, but she's kind of thin-skinned. And she's in Israel. And she's playing up, of course, October 7th, without a doubt, the savagery of this and bonding with the Israeli people and her credentials as an international figure and all good. You saw that recently she didn't endorse Trump, but as much say she's voting for him. And then she starts autographing bombs that are going to be used in the war in Gaza. Now, I support Israel's right to go after Hamas, to root them out, to kill every one of them. That's what they need to do. But you know there's collateral damage here when you do this, given how densely populated Gaza is, and particularly Rafah, this one part that they're in now. So Haley autographing bombs. I don't know who whispers to her and says, you know what, you have this reputation as a warmonger, which I believe she is. And the Republican Party, the Cheneys, Liz Cheney, think of Liz Cheney, think of Dick Cheney, would get us into these unending wars in which Americans die. Now, thank God, I saw the casualty rate the other day, and I thought this was unnecessary. What were these soldiers doing in Jordan? There were 3 of them last year. But Nikki Haley is exactly where the Republican Party is not. The biggest legacy of Trump, whatever happens here, whatever happens in the election, is the Supreme Court so far. But it's also that the Republican Party has shifted away from getting into these unending wars, these constant, unending, ceaseless wars in which Americans die and in which we spend billions and billions of dollars, like Ukraine. You see this change. It's remarkable. It really has changed a lot of. You still have the Lindsey Grahams and others, but Haley autographing bombs. You know, it's one thing, we're fighting Nazi Germany and you're autographing these bombs, but you still had civilian casualties. I mean, here in Gaza, even though necessary, your heart goes out. There are people trapped there, et cetera. Many of them are kids. It's a young population. And again, that's not blame on Israel. But you don't intensify your. This reminded me when I saw, you know what it reminded me of today? Kristi Noem. I was all set to interview Kristi Noem, and then interviews kind of stopped with her book. Was she proving her toughness by killing not only her dog, but then her goat? And talking about, I get dirty things done. She thought that would be appealing. Does Haley think autograph, because everything she does, she's more scripted than most, is to appeal, to show toughness? Are you out there going, oh, man, this guy Giordano, he's wrong. What's he doing in here? I love that Nikki Haley is autographing bombs. I'm not sure if she just signed her name. It looks like her name. But this is not the type of thing to fool around with. You know, I get it during World War II. I get some of that. But the idea of doing it in a situation like this, it's more the position with Israel is nobody's celebrating this. It's necessary for them to defend themselves and stop Hamas from coming back again and again and again. but it's not the type of thing where you go joyfully and you're autographing it. There, take that. It's a very Kristi Noem-like move. And again, you saw what happened to her as a VP choice. Could Trump still pick Nikki Haley? Yeah, I don't think he's going to. But if it gets down to that by the time we get to the convention, and yes, even if Trump is in jail, he can run. He will be running. And I think there will be a bit of a surge of support, but I don't know in the swing states, like where I am in Pennsylvania. I still think what you're going to see is a hung jury. Now, we're going to talk with a top-flight criminal defense attorney of a lot of experience in James Rosenthal. He's coming up, and we'll ask him, based upon what he saw today, a couple of things. How do you read this jury? We haven't seen them. We just have some smattering of information on them. Where do they go? And what would be compelling to them? And again, a 6-hour thing is overkill. Less is more here. 6 hours by the prosecution, that's 2 De Niro movies at least. You know, I loved Oppenheimer. My wife, not so much because of the length of it. And I could have watched even more because I've studied that, I know it. But there are films that I really like, but 3 hours, no, you push past the limit. This was 6 hours of this today. Did they really add to the jurors? Oh, now I see what they're doing. They had all this evidence. Why didn't we hear it in the trial? Well, you did hear what they had in the trial. A summation shouldn't be 6 hours. That's ridiculous. I think you lose people over that. So I don't think they got their intention. Boy, that wowed them. They're going back. They can hardly wait to get in there tomorrow. Now they see every nook and cranny of what Trump did. It would have been better to do what the defense did, which was 2 hours and change. If you're not good enough at summarizing everything during that, you're just stretching it out. You're getting your 15 minutes of fame. You're billing more. You're doing God knows what. I don't think it's effective. But we got big-time attorney coming up who's defended a lot of cases, and I read his bio. And reading his bio, it talks about the idea, boy, when your life is on the line, this is the guy you want in the ring with you. And I'd say this, Trump's attorneys in the past in various cases have been bad. You got to face it, whether you like Trump or not. They were not good. That Ty Cobb guy, the woman who's usually out there talking, not good. But the guy that he's had, Blanche, has been very effective, I think. Finally, he's arrived at competency rather than just showbiz. And when you're on trial for your very freedom, and this could be enormous, the amount of freedom lost, it could be a life sentence, essentially. I think you finally go with someone who really knows what they're doing and is very competent. And even though there have not been a lot of wow moments, I think that's what we've seen from the defense. But these next 48 hours are going to be excruciating. All right, coming up, we'll talk with attorney Jeremy Rosenthal, trial attorney out of Texas that has tried a lot of big cases and has been following this closely. And we'll get from him, what do you think can happen next? Your calls, too, at 833-4-VALDEZ. 833, the number 4, Valdes. Dom Giordano sitting in for Richie Valdes.
This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdes.
Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich, who I'm friends with and does a great job here. And particularly during this week, boy, the tension is incredible. I'm reading the bio of our guest trial attorney, Jeremy Rosenthal. He talks about calmness during this. And it's very compelling when you read the first paragraph of his bio here. Why would you hire Jeremy Rosenthal? Certainly I'd consider it after reading this, because this is I don't care who you are, this is the most difficult thing you can face, arguably. Jeremy, welcome. to America at Night. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and this is compelling. You would be making this case for a jury, very compelling of why we need you in the corner. So if you were doing this today, and I know the tactical thought of the prosecution, go long, go 6 hours. That'll show them we have a lot. Defense, 2 hours and change. I just don't think a jury's going to listen to 6 hours and think that's compelling.
Not in and of itself. I think it's about the narrative, and I think it's about the emotion that you bring to the table. And to some degree, I mean, it kind of sounds a little, I don't know, cliche, but some of the passion, the jury has to think that you believe it. The jury has to see your body language. They have to hear you. They have to see your eyes. They have to hear the inflection in your voice. And that's really hard to sustain for 4 hours or for 2.5 hours for that matter. That's just a marathon. And, I think the lawyers do it because they can, but I don't know that that's necessarily effective advocacy.
I asked every accomplished lawyer such as yourself that's tried multitude of cases, and I've interviewed maybe 100 over the course of times. How do you get to a jury what reasonable doubt is? Do you use something different in each case, or do you have a go-to that you think breaks through and takes that term, which is pivotal in this? How do you get through with that, Jeremy?
It's probably a case-by-case basis, but here's sort of one of my guiding operating principles. And some of the things on my website, just so you know, are actually true. Just some of them. I'm not sure which. I haven't read it in a minute. But at any rate, think of it like this. When people go and they serve on a jury, they want to get it right, regardless of your politics, regardless of whether you're pro-law enforcement, whether you're a bleeding heart, it doesn't matter. Everybody who walks in and has jury duty, they want to get it right. And really, again, just to kind of dial it back to the fourth grade, third grade level, it really is about the scales of justice. The jury wants to find a balance, right? So you have to find a way for really everybody to win and everybody to lose, because that's the way the juries are going to see it. Very rarely will you have a case, and there's plenty out there, but very rarely will you have the case where it is so cut and dry that, oh my gosh, we feel so badly that this guy is getting screwed, or, oh my God, you are such a criminal, you need to go to prison for the rest of your life. You've got cases like that out there. But what I find is if you split the difference and you can tell the jury, look, you don't have to get mad at the police. You don't have to get mad at the prosecutors. They're just doing their job. And it was hard for them to get to probable cause. That's the standard to arrest. That's the standard to indict. But at the same time, it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and they didn't get there. So at the end of this case, you can render a verdict that says not guilty, that they didn't reach their burden, but thank them for their service and tell them that they were right to bring this case, because this is a case that the jury does need to resolve. So that's a way of getting a jury, in my mind, to get them to the middle ground where their mind wants to take them. But of course, a not guilty verdict or a guilty verdict is a binary choice, right? So I know that it means that I win, of course, because I'm a lawyer and I have to, sometimes I've got to excrete that extra slime, but sometimes it works, right?
All right. Well, Jeremy, let me cut to the chase. I'm only a law school dropout. I won moot court and all that, but I didn't pass the bar. I got into this business, which is similar to yours. Mm-hmm. But I see this as a hung jury. Now, I'm ideologically conservative, but I see it in the end as a hung jury here. If more than one person sees it my way in this, if it's only one, the pressure is going to be excruciating on that juror. Save democracy, everything else. If you had to predict, and it's hard because we can't see these people and exactly what's going on in court, how does it feel to you? Certainly, I think it's impossible to imagine Trump is going to be acquitted here, given the politics, given everything else.
Well, first off, I'll tell you this. You are exactly right. You were right on the target about a holdout juror. They're going to get beaten on and beaten on and beaten on for 3 days straight. If you're a holdout, then that's what happens to you. Now, you've got to have friends. You've got to have friends on the panel if that's what you're going to do. I don't know that anybody who is, and these people, these jurors were chosen because they're watching podcasts about how to communicate with their cats. That's why they're there. They're not there because they read a lot of Wall Street Journal, New York Times.
Right.
They're not. If you had a strong opinion, you better lie about it, or you're not getting on that panel. So, assuming that they were able to sort of weed a lot of that out, then you've got some people who are going to be, I think, kind of in the middle. But if you get somebody who is so hardened, they've got to have some friends, because you just can't take that beating alone. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a hung jury or not. I do think that the majority of jurors who go back there are going to want to be done with this. And jurors, when you do have jury duty, I mean, there's some civic pride that goes into that. The vast majority of jurors who are done with jury service are extremely thankful. They're extremely prideful in what they've done. They're really proud of how they've been able to serve the community. Now, when a jury hangs, they all walk out of the room. They don't look at each other. They're pissed. They're angry. And in a case like this, what the judge would do is let them deliberate 2, 3, 4 days, 5 days, maybe.
Wait a minute. Let's get to that point. So the Allen charge, Jeremy, how would you tell people that are non-lawyers the Allen charge? And Mershon strikes me that he's really going to lay on that. If it's a deep minority, only 1 or 2 people, what does that mean if he gives them the Allen charge? Man,
look at you dropping Allen charge. That is, what do you mean you're not a lawyer? Look, I'm trying to get. I'm the one who can't get into broadcasting. You can certainly get into doing what this is. Okay, good for you, man. That's impressive. Okay, an Allen charge is what we also call a dynamite charge. What an Allen charge does is 2/3, 3/4 of the way through. Look, I mean, people go back there, they vote. And it's going to be 6-6, 5-7, 9-3, whatever, right? There's going to be a split, and the jury can't come back and say, okay, well, I guess we're hanging. The judge is going to say, yeah, nice try. They give the Allen charge. The Allen charge says, dear jury, this is from the judge to the jury, dear jury, we really love that you have your opinions. It's really great to have strong opinions, and that's why you're serving America and this, that, and chicken fat. But by the way, could you pretty please with sugar on top listen to your buddy, because we really want a verdict here. If you haven't noticed, this case is kind of a big deal. We spent a little bit of money on this. These things aren't free. So if you could come to a verdict, that would be great. And if the jury still is deadlocked after a while after that Allen charge is read, then the judge in all likelihood declares a mistrial, and we get to do this again.
So you think then potentially this could be up to a week or so?
As a rule of thumb, a trial judge would allow a jury to deliberate about as long as the trial itself took. Now, obviously, that is nuts here. That's designed for a DWI trial that takes a day. That's designed for a street murder case, which takes 3 or 4 days. Okay, that's what that is. So I can't fathom that this deliberation is going to take anywhere near that long. Now, part of it, they're going to have to go back there and find the bathroom. Part of it, they're going to go back there and pick a foreman. Part of it is they're going to go back there and they're going to go back and just most jurors, even if all are in agreement here, they're going to go back through everything just because they know there's a lot of eyeballs on them, and they don't want to come back in 3 hours. That's just not going to happen. I would anticipate about a 2-day deliberation, maybe 3 or 4 max. I think we're going to know if we've got a hung jury. If they're not, what's tomorrow? Tomorrow's Wednesday. I think we're going to be starting to speculate about a hung jury if we don't have a verdict by Friday. So we'll see about that. I don't think it's going to hang. I've got a bet with somebody in my office about whether or not it's going to hang. So if there's a guilty verdict or a not guilty verdict, either way, I'm going to cash in maybe. And hopefully it's not a big bet. It's not a big bet.
Yeah, and I hear you. Well, I'll put a pizza on that we'll send down to Texas. What's the Texas thing you'll put up here if we get you back on Thursday?
Oh, Oh, pizza. Gosh, I don't know. How about some fajitas, some Tex-Mex?
Okay. Okay. All right. We
right.
got that going on. Yeah, I'll tell the producers here because I think we're going to be here. I'm going to be here Thursday again, and love talking with you, Jeremy, very much, and hope to see you around media channels. We'll contact you in Philadelphia at some point, get you on. Thank you. Thanks for coming on tonight.
I'd love to. Thank you. And let me know the address and we'll get those fajitas sent over when this thing hangs. And I'll be like, man, you were right about the Allen charge. You're right about this. That's impressive.
Thank you, Jeremy, very much. All right. That's why you love filling in here. Big show on America at Night. All right. The phone lines, I could tell he thinks maybe guilty verdict. I still think hung jury. 833-482-5337. Get in with Dom Giordano. Sitting in tonight on America at Night.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdes. Call now, 833-4-VALDES. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDES. That's Valdes with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdes.
Yes, it is with Dom Giordano pinch hitting. Love that interview with Jeremy Rosenthal. I think he thinks guilty verdict on the horizon. I see it as a hung jury. We got a bet going on. 833-4-VALDES gets you to me. How closely are you following this? And again, you can be in the camp. I have people tell me all the time, oh, if Trump is convicted, it doesn't matter. He's going to get even more support. That's not supported by where we are. I think his supporters and some people on the fence will be outraged that he's convicted in this. See it as lawfare, which it is, and on all those things. But incrementally in the swing states, like where I am in Pennsylvania, you're going to have some people who, tonight later we're going to talk with someone about inflation, just fast food, what it's doing. My wife went to Five Guys. I'm not sure if Five Guys is national or regional. I'm a little bit unclear. I'll find out on that. And just had a kid's hamburger, kids fries, and a small drink. And it was $15. And she was going to give the guy a 10. She didn't know the prices. And when you got $5 back from a 20, he said, well, I gave you a 20. He said, yeah, I know what you mean. Bidenomics. Are people really looking for a reason then to move away from Trump? And there are people where I am, these Pennsylvania suburbs, who just can't vote for Trump. They see the destruction of Biden. They see what's going on. And we're left with those voters, maybe under 200,000 voters in 6 swing states, determining the fate of the country. That's what it's coming down to. So any shift, whichever way it goes, and all we have people looking to do is to put that tag on him that he's a convicted felon. All right, let me go to Jay in Pittsburgh on KDKA. Hey, Jay, welcome to America at Night. Hi.
Hi. Hey, you guys got it all wrong. I'm for Trump, but I'm going to tell you something. Biden rigged the election back in 2020, whatever. Because when I went to bed, Trump was
well, okay, Jay, I don't want to relitigate that. We've been through that. And even Trump, to his credit, is not going down that path of the election. He's been much better at looking forward. So tell me what you think about what we're talking about.
Well, here's what I think. Since he rigged the election, he got the juries, the judge, the prosecuting attorneys, all in his favor. So he's going to come guilty, even though if he isn't, but he's going to become. They're not wasting all this time for nothing.
All right, we will see. Thank you, Jay. I differ with you. I think you're going to find 1 or 2 votes on here, and if it's more than 1, that is critical. In other words, I think there are some people on here that are going to try to look past just the pressure of New York and all the rest of it. But if you want to believe it's just all rigged, give up now. nothing's going to matter, well, then go right ahead to that. That's not where I'm looking at this. I'm still saying there's going to be a hung jury. And again, the second crime, whatever that is, has not been committed. And if this jury does fall in line, and particularly if they do it quickly and say guilty, I'm going to be surprised. I'm going to be more surprised if they acquit. I think that's an impossibility. They're not going to acquit. That part's true. All right, more calls coming up. Dom Giordano sitting in on America at Night.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdes. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdes.
And it's Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich tonight at 833-4-VALDES, V-A-L-D-E-S. You can get on board. So we just heard a very prominent attorney break down. I think he's saying he believes Trump is going to be convicted. I think clearly, to me, as clear as you could be without seeing the jury, without seeing the trial, just by going by the transcripts and the back and forth commentary, hung jury. And this idea that the spin out there on the Trump side, Vivek Ramaswamy saying, well, whatever happens, it's going to benefit Trump. I don't see it that way. This is going to be very difficult if he is found guilty in this. And around the edges, it might make it difficult. He can still run from jail and all that, but there are going to be difficulties with that. But I don't see that happening. I see a hung jury. And Trump is not looking backward at 2020. That rally in the South Bronx, I wasn't on here after that, but on my show in Philadelphia, I really said, what a difference. I was in Wildwood for the Trump rally there. The Trump outreach to voters of color is remarkable for a Republican, how that's working. It's these people in the suburbs around the issue of abortion and Trump's personality maybe holding out. Will they come home? And again, maybe under 250,000 people are going to decide this election in the end in places like Pennsylvania. Whoever wins Pennsylvania is going to win the presidency. I'll be shocked. I think in the end, even though Biden has trouble in Michigan, I think it's very difficult for the Republican to win Michigan. Possible here. I don't see either one running these swing states as we saw the last time. It's going to be very close. And what happens over the next 48 to 72 hours is going to go a long way to sealing this. And if it's a hung jury, I think Trump is really in the driver's seat. And then we'll see what other bumps and turns. By the way, tonight, speaking of Michigan, the Biden policy in places like Gaza, this Gaza pier, what a boondoggle. It's sinking or it's sunk at this point. Bringing in supplies to the poor people in Gaza, being stolen by Hamas, our soldiers, our military being put at risk to be fired upon in constructing and putting that together. And now the reports out there tonight that it's sunk or is sinking and is not operable. And in the middle of that, you have Nikki Haley autographing bombs to be dropped on Gaza. It's a circus a minute. But the thing that I think unites all of us, maybe some more than others, is inflation. We're going to talk about that and how that diminishes the average American. Remember that saying, it's the economy, stupid? Well, it's not the economy, stupid. It's the cost of living, stupid. That's where we are now. That's what's going on. And it's a very difficult thing for a lot of Americans. Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich Valdes on America at Night.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdes America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdes.
Well, here's Dom Giordano in Philadelphia sitting in for Rich. I'm about 17 miles away. Now I'm about 11.5 from the Liberty Bell as a reference. And I'm looking for anybody out there who over Memorial Day had pickle relish. Was it pickle relish that was left over? And, did you guard it with your life? Because when you look at the annual Memorial Day barbecue under Bidenomics, some of the prices are just ridiculous. But pickle relish is up nearly 50% more expensive than in 2023, year over year. A cost change, says Fox Business, from $314 to $467. And there are headlines out there how fast food has become a luxury. You may have had that experience. Now, that's a little bit of overkill, maybe. My wife, Ro, had an experience today. She was telling me she likes Five Guys, which I know is franchise. I'm not sure how far off the East Coast it goes. Great food. And she had a kid's burger, kids' fries, and a small drink. And gave the guy a 20, and he gave back $5. And she said, I gave you a 20. She was going to give him a 10. It was around $15. We've all had that experience with something where you just can't believe it. And the pickle relish and what happened at a barbecue, people say the word inflation as if there's no cause of this. But Joe Biden can't accept this. Wall Street Journal today. Biden needs more empathy on the economy. David Axelrod, the chief guy who did a great job for President Obama. This has been a constant problem. His desire to claim credit for the economy is a huge obstacle to connecting with voters. Now, James Carville, way back in the day in Little Rock, the Clinton campaign headquarters, and Clinton, even though undisciplined as a person, was a very disciplined candidate, would say again, it's the economy, stupid. It's the economy. Or Carville would say it's the economy. Headline today, American Spectator, it's the cost of living, stupid. Yeah, the cost of living. No matter how they try to cook some stat, this is like in baseball. You see a guy hitting under 200, he has one or two home runs or something like that. And they try to tell you, yeah, but his OPS plus or his WAR wins above replacement. They're unbelievable. I go by the eye test and I go by the bottom line of the standard things. And what people are saying is we don't want to hear all this macroeconomics. The microeconomics, the thing that matters to the average American is what can they do? What's their quality of life with their money? And for most people, even if they're middle, depending, they're diminished by this. They have to make more decisions about, no, we can't do that. Pickle relish. Who's responsible? And Biden keeps on saying one wild thing after another, and he can't show empathy. He was elected to say he's a normal guy. He cares. His son, Bo, the whole thing with this guy's career. He's a caring man. Donald Trump is not. Why can't he show empathy on this? What happened, and I've been waiting for a time. It's been a while since I've sat in here on the show. What happened in the very beginning of the Biden administration? A bunch of these historians got his ear, John Meacham and these others, and they told him, Joe, to be a significant president, you may only have one term. Go big. Be like FDR, LBJ. Spend big. That's what you got to do. That's how you're consequential. That's how you go down in the history books. There was no reason to do that. There was no reason to continue that. Inflation was around 1.9%, which is relatively normal toward the end of the Trump years. Biden, at some points, it was 9%. And that 9% is not going away. Even though the rate may go down, that is baked in. And still, month over month, we see these jumps. And people are living that. And I think they're tired of hearing this guy tell them one nonsensical thing after another, and advisors who don't get it This is not America to me. Americans shouldn't be diminished like this. We shouldn't be having to live like this. I'm not saying it's a depression or anything, but he can't show empathy on it. And every time we talk about the economy, they keep saying, well, he hasn't done a good enough job. We haven't been out there. We're not telling your story. What is your story? And then you have people like our senator in Pennsylvania who Biden likes, Bob Casey Jr., telling us it's creepflation. The corporate America is doing it. And it's shrinkflation. Have you seen those Snicker bars? That's what we continue to get. They can't address the real problem because they want to spend and they want to keep on spending. That's what Biden wants to do. That's what the conflict is. So now they're trying, well, Trump only wants to cut taxes for the wealthy. I don't think that's going to work. It's not going to work to say, hey, we took care of your student loan debt. That gets more outrage of people listening right now. They're driving off the road. Why would we be picking winners and losers like that? Well, he's trying to point toward areas where he's, quote, cut costs, helped you out. Student loan debt, price of insulin. All right, the price of insulin down, that's a good thing. What about the price of going to the grocery store? What is the item you looked at and said, no, I'm not paying for that? And you're saying, yes, he's responsible. That's what it's about. How is this economy great? The measure of an economy, yes, unemployment, employment, that's something. But the measure is how much money do you have to spend toward items that you want to buy, staples and the like, versus what you're making. And real wages have not increased to keep up with that. And inflation is not going down. It's baked in. The rate has gone down. That's true. But it comes back every month. We see something else. And then Wall Street goes wild. Also, if you're trying to get a home, be it first home, a couple, doing those kinds of things, they're not going to lower those rates. That makes it increasingly difficult. So how is Biden hanging in there then if people are feeling that? Well, I think he's hanging in there because you have some people who just can't stand the thought of Donald Trump. And they don't know what to do in this situation. About 250,000 of them are in the swing states, and they're going to make a decision that's going to determine this election. But the bottom line is Biden can't show empathy. David Axelrod telling him to do that because he doesn't feel it. He's mad about this stuff. He's going to be in my neck of the woods tomorrow, and I'll tell you about it tomorrow night when I sit in for Rich, at Girard College. Girard College was founded for poor kids. It's not a college. It's 1 through 12 in Philadelphia, usually African-American students. It's it's nationally renowned. And I think he's going to tell these kids how much America hates them, like he said at Morehouse College. It's poisonous. And he can't run away from inflation. He did it. He doesn't know what to do to get out of it. He can't, and he doesn't want to get out of it. He wants to keep on spending. So what are we doing? We're coming up with all these excuses and we're blaming the voters. Why is their perception so bad? Now, people that say that are people living in bubbles, making 200, 300, 400, 500,000 a year. They're affected by it to some degree, but not to the degree of people in the broad middle class. They have to make decisions, and they see some of these prices. Now, you may have one where you went, no, I'm not paying for that, or you just couldn't believe it. You just couldn't believe that that could be the price. So the guy at Five Guys says to my wife, yeah, I know what you mean, what you were expecting, Bidenomics. Now versus what Trump proposes. Obviously superior, obviously things would be better, but I can't look myself in the mirror and vote for Trump. I understand that's what a lot of these people are saying. They see the recklessness. This selfish man, President Biden, wanted to be a great president. He went with these historians and others, some of whom had people that were on the staff of FDR, LBJ, and they kept on egging him on. Spend more, be big, be a big name in the history books. Well, we see where this is taking us, and it's not going to end easily or anytime soon. I think what the Fed is doing has been pretty responsible. All right, I want to get some calls in. So here's how you do it with Dom sitting in for Rich. Just go to 833, the number 4, Valdes, 833-482-5337. Coming up in a little bit, we're going to talk with E.J. Antoni, research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, brilliant guy who's written a lot, studied a lot recently about what fast food prices. Now, I don't have a dog in that fight. I'm not a fast food guy per se. French fries, yeah, I could go for that. But people go in and they're amazed. And then all the excuses start. Well, that must be in New York or Washington where everything is high cost. No, it's all over the place. Yeah, well, you're making more money now, Biden has said. Is that true? And it's corporate America that's doing it. They're taking advantage of you. It's not what Biden created. Suddenly, all these supermarkets, all these fast food places, all these Targets and everything else, they just said, we're going to stick it to you now. We're going to charge whatever we want. Why are they not charging more? Well, the reason is because it's cutthroat competition. The number of Americans going to Walmart now versus Target is increased tremendously. Why? It's cheaper. Is it what people would rather do as far as quality? No. Why are they going? It's cheaper. It's the only thing they can do to survive. All right, you'll get in with me right now at 833, the number 4, Valdes.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdes.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdes.
Oh, you can't do any better than that, Rich. Nice stuff. Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich tonight. And again, I wish, I see all these polls indicating, and I'm not buying it, that illegal immigration is the issue. I get the emotion of that. And I've always been a strong protect the borders guy, strength of that. But I think the thing where the vote's going to be decided, it's got to be on inflation. Are people going to say, well, it's not Biden's fault, it's just happenstance? Are they going to say, well, yeah, but, I'm saving democracy, so I don't care what prices are? Are they going to say, my God, this is just impossible to believe? Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich. Let's go to Paul in Boise, Idaho. Hey, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good job so far.
Thank you.
I've felt from the beginning, before the trial actually began, that the fix was in. They couldn't get a change of venue, and they couldn't get a change of the judge. And 1 out of 2 I could see them doing, but doing 0 for 2, that was kind of a given. And, they're holding true. They're extremely arrogant people, these Dems. And now they're just throwing it in everybody's face. And
well, I wouldn't count too much, though, Paul, that this has been effective, though, that there are not a couple or 3 people on the jury that are going to not go along with this. And I'm still predicting there will be a hung jury here ultimately.
I sure hope you're right. I really do. Because he's had the deck stacked against him from the beginning. And then I've grown to come to the saying that, the Dems are above the law, and they prove it time and time and time again.
Well, guess what? Next week is the start of the Hunter Biden, the most entitled, privileged person arguably in America, Paul, and Joe Biden meeting with Haley Biden privately, who's one of the witnesses. So I think there's a good chance, though, you're going to see justice finally with Hunter Biden. Paul, thank you. Thanks so much. Look, I don't doubt what Paul said. This Judge Marchand, his daughter is not just some flunky Democrat. She's raised an awful lot of money for Democrats, prominent senators and the like. She's a big player. There's no way that he can be part of this. And it's not happenstance that he's in there. Still, with all this, I don't see that certainly Trump's not going to be acquitted. I think anybody who wants to bet on that you can take money and throw it away. There's no shot. But I still believe if there's more than one person, and that's a big if here, those two lawyers and others, you're going to see a hung jury out of this. And then Trump's going to be able to make the point that Paul just did about the backdrop of this. And De Niro there today plays into the hands of jurors and others seeing this. I got to believe, based upon how attentive the jury's been and everything else, that there are a few who are not just driven to convict Trump. That's where I am. That's a gut instinct I have. That's what I see playing out. Let's go to Linda in Albany, New York on WDGJ. Hey, Linda, welcome to the Rich Valdes Show, America at Night. Hi.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for taking my call. I agree. I hope it is a hung jury if that seems the best way to go. And people need to remember something. Trump got us a good in the middle class tax break, which is about to expire. Biden has said he will not renew it. We've got to get Trump back in office. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Linda. That's exactly right. It expires in January. And look, it did help the wealthy, but I think it's helped everybody across the board in corporate America, and that savings passed on to people. If you notice, when Biden starts talking, you're waiting to hear the greater bulk, the great middle class in America. How has he improved those lives, or at least left them alone? I'd be satisfied with that. So would you. And the answer is he starts talking about junk fees. He starts talking about Snickers bars, insulin. That's a good thing, but that's, student loan debt. Forgiving that? No. What does he say about people? He doesn't want to hear about that. He's trying to tell you all these other good things. And you're saying, why is the guacamole so expensive? Why can't I get pickle relish? What do you mean it's 50% up from last year? Pickle relish is Bidenomics. And that's what you're going to get more of this. If you Google it sometime. The Weimar Republic, when it collapsed, countries, this is why they collapsed. In Germany, people going to get a loaf of bread with the wheelbarrow of the currency in the wheelbarrow because that's how much it had been diluted. Now, we're not going to get to that point. But when you go into a fast food restaurant and got to take out a 20 rather than a 10 or a 5 all the time, well, then you're starting to see what the problem is. Coming up, we'll talk with noted economist E.J. Antoni, research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, about fast food and try to drill down a little bit to tell you why. I'll ask him, I'll try to push back and be devil's advocate. E.J., come on. It's not Biden. It's Big Burger. These people are jacking up the prices. Who are you kidding? We can't blame Biden for that. They're all in a conspiracy. They don't want him to be president. Trump likes fast food more than Biden does. Biden likes ice cream. So they're all in it to make it hard on Americans so they get Trump back in there. I don't know what Big Ice Cream is doing. All right, my name is Dom Giordano, sitting in for Rich Valdes here on America at Night.
America at Night with Rich Valdes.
Dom Giordano pinch hitting, and America at Night is not going through the Wendy's or McDonald's windows as much. It's a luxury. Is that true? Fast food is a luxury, and if so, who's responsible for that? Big Burger or Bidenomics? Joining us is just a great guy, really gets talk radio. I hear him with my colleague Rich Valdes in Philadelphia often. E.J. Antoni is a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, among other things, and has written about and really analyzed what's going on, particularly with fast food. E.J., welcome to America at Night. Thanks for joining us.
Dom, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, I hear you with Rich a lot. So let me be the other side here, EJ. We're talking about pickle relish of all things, going up 50% since last year. How do we determine how much of this is due to Biden's inflationary policy, and how do we rule out that corporate America is the one doing a large share of this? How do you make that judgment?
Well, Dom, I like to start by just saying that it doesn't even really pass the smell test that the big increases we've seen in food prices is somehow just due to corporations being greedy, because then you have to explain how corporations all magically became greedy in January of 2021, or maybe it had something to do with the public policy that changed around that time. But if you want to do it a more empirical analysis, you can look at corporate profits in the food industry. And what you find there is that adjusted for inflation, they're actually down. In other words, just like how the average American's paycheck is bigger today than it was 3 years ago, but buys less, corporate profits are in the exact same situation because their costs have gone up, just like our costs as consumers have gone up. So yes, they're selling their products for a higher price, but it's costing them so much more to make it that in real terms, they're not actually making more money. They're making less in the food industry.
And that's often the tagline that President Biden uses, how much their stock is up and all this, who are they kidding, et cetera. When you take a look at this out there, though, is it a fair statement, the headlines, it's provocative? Would you write a headline saying that fast food now is potentially a luxury? Is that an overstatement?
No, I don't think so. And one of the reasons why I really like looking at a lot of fast food prices to get a good gauge on inflation, Dom, is because take something like the Big Mac. It has a surprising amount of inputs across the economy. You're not just talking about labor, but you're also talking about fuel prices, diesel fuel to transport all the ingredients, the fuels that are needed to heat the ingredients, to actually cook the food. You're talking about wheat. You're talking about beef. You're talking about lettuce, et cetera. You have all of these different inputs that really span a large section of the economy. And so it ends up being a really good inflation gauge where you can see a wide variety of prices incorporated into a single item. And when something like that doubles in just a few years, that should really be getting our attention as to just how bad these price increases are.
What about, I agree with you. This is a very good gauge versus having to list 100 products. What about the argument, though, that corporate America, though, at least is shrinking the product? That's the Bob Casey talking to President Biden. They are doing that.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, that ends up, in a lot of ways, Dom, softening the blow to consumers. And it's not that the consumer is going to pay less for the same amount of food, right? Because they're not getting the same amount of food. But what it allows a lot of cash-strapped consumers to do is to essentially buy smaller amounts at a single time. You don't necessarily have to buy in bulk. So while, again, it's not saving you money in the long run, if you're a consumer who's living paycheck to paycheck and you just can't afford to buy a 12-pack or a 20-pack of something right now, being able to buy 5 or 6 might be just enough to get you by, so you're not relying on a credit card to make it, to be able to put food on the table.
Put on your big economic hat now here, AJ. So let's say Biden's out, this stops, Trump is president. What is it that he would be doing? Is it just energy that would be a big jolt here by unleashing our energy? Or what else do you do to reverse something like this? And, without a jolt to something organic like the economy, how long would be reasonable to see us start to roll some of this back that's baked in?
Oh, Dom, that's a good question. We have a lot that is baked in, which is really going to start hitting the fan in 2025. We have a lot of economic headwinds. Commercial real estate is a prime example of that. There are a lot of losses that have not yet been realized. So that'll be a big drag on the economy in the future. It'll help push up prices, but also push down growth. So what does the next president have to do? They have to get the spending down in addition to deregulating all of the energy essentially limitations that have been put on by the Biden administration. We could be producing a lot more oil, a lot more natural gas. We could be not just energy independent, but energy dominant again. And we could be essentially taking away revenue sources from dictators in places like Iran by essentially pushing down the global price of energy, which is how those nations are fueling their war machine. But the reason we have to get the government spending down, Dom, is because that is what is chiefly driving the inflation. The government is spending trillions of dollars it doesn't have, which means the Treasury has to borrow it. And in order to keep bond yields down, the Fed is essentially growing the money supply, creating money out of thin air in order to give it to the Treasury so that they actually have money available to borrow. But as you do that, you are diluting the value of the dollar. It's like pouring water into a glass of whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, the total volume went up, but the actual amount of alcohol in the glass hasn't changed.
How about the argument, though, that over the last year, EJ, the Biden people saying that real wages have actually increased? Is that fiction?
I don't understand where they are coming up with these numbers. If you look at the average American's weekly paycheck, it literally just fell again in the month of April. So, and these aren't even my numbers, Dom. I genuinely don't know where they're coming up with these talking points. I am using the Biden administration's own figures, and they show that the average American's weekly paycheck bought less in April than it did in March. So please, for the love of all that is holy, tell me where on earth they are getting these numbers. Well, then again, the guy who's coming up with these numbers, Jerry Bernstein, he's the chief economic advisor at the White House. Let's not forget, the man doesn't even have an economics degree. I think his degrees are in music and social work, if I remember correctly. So maybe that explains how he's coming up with these numbers.
I'd pay pay-per-view to have you debate him, but it's unfair because the one thing that guy has, though, he will just say anything. He'll come on the show and he'll argue as if he really believes it, which he pretty much does because he's unskilled in this. And he's maybe their most effective guy on this. EJ, the one thing that heartens me, and I don't know if you have a sense of this, if you agree, early on when this was happening in supermarkets, I didn't know if people would connect the dots and say what inflation is, where it comes from, even if not the textbook, but that it's a responsibility of the Biden overspending that went on here. Do you think the average American does connect it to that, to Biden?
I think more and more, Dom, they are starting to piece it together. And, part of the problem here, frankly, I think is conservatives for so-called conservatives at least, who for several decades were basically the boy who cried wolf and said, oh, my gosh, these budget deficits, they're going to ruin the country. They're going to cause inflation. And yes, they were right on the direction, but they were wrong on the magnitude. And because they were so hyperbolic for so long, people stopped listening. But I think folks are starting to listen again. At the end of the day, Dom, every single dime of government spending has to be paid for. It's just a question of how are you going to pay for it. You can pay for it through explicit taxes like the federal income tax, or you can pay for it through implicit taxes like the hidden tax of inflation. So every time you have to go out and spend extra money to put groceries in the back seat or gas in the tank, guess what? You are paying that hidden tax of inflation.
And I'm not going to let President Trump off the hook on this, that I think he was a relatively big spender. But to your point, orders of magnitude, what Biden did, and to me, I've been on this for a while, EJ, because he had on the grandson on this committee that whispers in his ear of Wallace, Henry Wallace, who, thank God, FDR took him out as vice president. We would have had potentially a communist president in 1944, 45, telling him, you got to go big, Joe. That's the way to be a significant president. And John Meacham and all these others, the fingerprints are all over that. I never thought Biden would go this far.
Oh, dear goodness. Well, I hoped he would never have gone this far, and yet here we are, Dom. And this is part of why when we talk about some of these economic numbers, it really flies over people's heads. not because it's difficult to understand, but because it just doesn't match the reality that people are living day to day. More than half of Americans right now think we're in a recession. Why? It's because that's what their personal finances are doing today. They are receding. They are getting worse. And you can put off a technical recession, at least on the nationwide level, for a very long time if you're willing to go into enough debt at the federal level. Well, that's precisely what we're doing. But this goes back to something we said earlier, how 2025 is going to be a very rough year economically. Unless we continue that death spiral of these enormous federal deficits, GDP is eventually going to have to turn negative simply because the government won't be spending as much. Now, that's not even necessarily a bad thing, but it will show up that way in the official numbers.
Absolutely. Parting for you then, EJ's advice, what's the number or what do we look at? Or is it as simple as Americans have this? They're looking, that line, it's the economy stupid. Now the new line is, it's the cost of living stupid.
Well, some might say those two things are connected, right, Dom? I think it's kind of a false dichotomy to separate those. I mean, look, at the end of the day, what's going on with the typical American household? They are paying much more for everything than they did before, and those prices have risen much faster than their actual incomes on average. Now, if you're a very high income earner, you've done just fine. But for most Americans, that's not the case. On top of that, these incredible budget deficits, multi-trillion-dollar deficits, have caused interest rates to rise. You put those effects together because those higher interest rates increase the costs of borrowing, which you might as well just throw that on the cost of whatever you're buying to begin with. So you put all this together, the typical American family feels like they're $8,100 poorer. It's as if you knocked that much off their annual salary today as compared to when Biden took office. So of course people are upset. Of course people feel terrible about this economy because it's affecting them personally in a very terrible way. The average American worker has a weekly paycheck today that's $150 bigger than it was in January of 2021, and yet it buys $50 less.
Absolutely. EJ, thank you so much. What a pleasure to connect with you finally. Thank you for joining us.
No, Dom, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. All right, Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich here at 833, the number 4, Valdes, here on America at Night.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdes. Call now, 833-4-VALDES. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDES. That's Valdes with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdes.
Yeah, that's right. With Dom Giordano pinch hitting tonight. Let me go to Brody in Pittsburgh on the great KDKA. Hey, Brody, welcome to America at Night.
Hi, Dom. Dominic,
Hi.
Of course.
Yes.
I like your show very much in Philadelphia
Thank you.
past. And, even though I'm in Pittsburgh, seriously, sir, it's such an honor to talk to you. I just want to tell you that. Such an honor.
Thank you.
The reason why I called, I had to look at the replays because I've been driving all day with, I love it how De Niro started screaming and then the guy put the car alarm off. It's just crazy.
New York, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, the mega supporters down there, they did, there wasn't a full out brawl, which I don't like violence and everything, but it's just, I just want to know with this trial and all the other trials, I know this trial, we don't know what's going to go on, but do you think he's going to be okay in the other trials that he's in? Like,
yes,
that fraud with yes.
Well, I think so. In Atlanta, that's, look at Fannie Willis, look how compromised that is. In the documents case, the judge just said no to a gag order on Trump and really reamed out the prosecutor there, Jack Smith. In the immunity, in the case, we have the immunity around the January 6th case, and also getting inside, Brody, the mind of Trump and what he was thinking and the language and all that's going to be very difficult in that case. This is the case, even though this is the weakest, and it all hinges on, is Trump a convicted felon or not politically? If it's a hung jury, I think he's home free on all these other things.
Yeah, but the thing is the misconduct of this judge. How he's, how you said, I was listening in the car about how he's tipping the scales, he's putting his toes on the scale.
Yeah,
he's going to instruct the jury tomorrow. How is justice like this? They're using the courts for political gain, and they're going to be looking at this for many, many years ahead of time after we're long done and buried. It's absolutely.
Thank you, Brody, very much. Look, on appeal, Alan Dershowitz and people like that, the ultimate and appellate courts, it's a no-brainer. They'll win against this judge and against what's going on here. But the politics of it are getting that tag that Biden wants from the Oval Office, say Friday or Saturday, convicted felon, convicted criminal Donald Trump. That's all that this is about, not even prison time or anything else. Politically, they believe that has leverage. All right, here's how you get in. 833, the number 4, Valdes. Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich on America at Night.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdes. This is America at Night with Rich Valdes.
Hey, it's Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich tonight at 833, the number 4, Valdes. Let me go to Nancy, who is in Iowa, KBIZ. Hey, Nancy, thanks for the wait. Go right ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
I got a comment about the Cohen and that Stormy Daniel in the trial for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
If the judge can't see that they're liars, the poor guy needs to go back to school.
Well, that's the whole point. They are. It doesn't matter in this. We're just hoping there are 2 or 3 people on the jury that are not going to be swayed just by all this nonsense, Nancy, and I'm betting there are.
Well, I know I'm going to vote for Trump, so.
All right, Nancy, thank you. Thanks very much for hanging in there. Mark in Houston, Texas, KYST. Mark, welcome.
Thank you very much for taking my call, and thanks to your producer for running the risk of doing so.
Okay.
I'd like to offer a minority report if possible.
Sure, Mark.
Most everybody is saying that if it's a hung jury, it's great. My concern is what's to keep that arsewipe of a prosecutor and the judge from going for an expedited retrial, in which case they could keep him off the campaign trail for another 6 weeks.
Well, I would tell you, though, that that's possible. I don't know how expedited it would be. That's the unknown, Mark, of how quickly that would happen. And look, that versus a guilty verdict here, in which they can call him a convicted criminal, I think is a success. And Trump has been, I would argue, maybe even more effective by not campaigning as much and hitting the targets that he has and drawing attention in a good way to the trial. I think this has been a really effective stretch for him.
Well, I agree with you, and his popularity seems to be growing, and
yes.
people are opening their eyes for the first time.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for the call. Again, less is more sometimes. You know, Trump wants to entertain. He's out there at a rally and all. He's going to go too far and say something. Here, more limited. It's been all gravy. Look at the South Bronx. That was the best of Trump, by far, what he did during that appearance. All right, Dom Giordano sitting in on America at Night.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdes, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdes.
Absolutely. Dom Giordano pinch hitting. And anytime I pinch hit on this great show, last hour is kind of throwing in any number of fun things that are out there. Our eyes, of course, the countdown now into Wednesday here on the East Coast, looking at the Trump trial, where we go today with jury instructions. But imagine while all this is going on, the Korean government is offering people an incentive to reverse vasectomies because their birth rate is so low. Now, first of all, the very idea over the years, and even the Seinfeld had a great thing where Newman, Jerry considering it, Kramer does it, coming out, the guy that Elaine was going with the new crew did get a vasectomy. Just the very idea of it has always been something I skip past pretty quickly. But then reversing it, how much of an incentive would you have that the government is going to put up? And I don't think we're anywhere near that kind of low birth rate. But in several countries, well, in Europe, Italy's one I remember over the years, it got pretty close to, or it may still be there, almost a negative, particularly post-COVID. But Japan, Korea now, just a story. It's hard to believe. How many people are going to use that government incentive to consider a vasectomy after they've gone through it once? Yeah, I know it's supposed to be state-of-the-art. I know people that have done it and all that. And I just don't get reversing it and then coming out of it and moving, who was it? Michael Scott's character, or Michael Scott in The Office, I think did a reverse and then back again. All right, so we'll keep our eye on that here at America at Night. Where I am in the Philadelphia area, Jersey Shore is famous. It's one of the great vacation places, resorts in the world. And Ocean City, New Jersey, has been voted almost year after year, the last umpteen number of years, as America's favorite family resort area. Ocean City, New Jersey, not Ocean City, Maryland, even though it's great too. And where I used to go to the shore, and still my wife and I do, and we took the kids there over the years, Wildwood is known nationally also. Wildwood a bit looser, a little bit more rowdy. So over the weekend, we had a stabbing on the boardwalk in Ocean City, New Jersey. Wildwood had these, where they called it civil unrest and shut down the town like a national emergency. And what's at the bottom of this? Well, it's more broader than just something hijinks happening over Memorial Day weekend on these Jersey Shore towns. When New Jersey became, I don't know, were they 15th, 18th, 20th state to legalize marijuana for adults, it wasn't even close. The vote was like 60-40. Even more conservative places were pretty close or went to legalize marijuana. The then Attorney General of this very progressive guy named Phil Murphy, who has national aspirations, the governor of New Jersey, said now, essentially, these racist police can't go after people of color, marijuana, because adults can have it recreationally. There's a big battle over how much you can be caught with before you're considered a dealer, and they could go after you. It's enormous how much. All right, so what happened then is they said these police are going to go after juveniles. So they put into play these policies in which an officer can be charged with official deprivation of civil rights if they knowingly, but not necessarily intentionally, violate the cannabis law's requirements for investigating underage use. This applies to alcohol, too. The charge is a third-degree offense for the cop that carries a punishment of up to 5 years in prison and a $15,000 fine. Well, this has set off every summer now, the last 2 or 3 summers. These shore towns where kids gather, they're not going to move on. The cops have lost their authority on this. I had the police chief of Avalon on my show, and he talked about the difference and how difficult it would be to assert usual discretionary authority from the cop, the chilling effect on them. And what we've seen over this past weekend is the tip of the iceberg, and we're going to see more of it. Now, what drives this? Well, the governor was on a TV show yesterday, and he talked about, diversity, equity, inclusion, and he doesn't see what the problem is. Now, Ocean City, New Jersey's got a brand that's $1 billion brand. A few years ago, Ocean City, New Jersey had a problem with seagulls swooping in and stealing food, harassing people, etc. What did they do? They put an owl up there. They got this guy who's a bit like a character out of Independence Day, that scientist. He looked like him, with hawks all over the place. And those seagulls did not attack in Ocean City. But now they're facing kids whose parents are often pretty affluent. They might be a lawyer, that kind of thing. They're doing stuff, I was told by one store owner of several stores in Ocean City, just coming into a candy store on the boardwalk, just standing there eating candy, and what are you going to do about it? In addition to the violence that we're seeing. And again, this is progressivism. It's not liberalism per se. This is way beyond that. Taking away that authority of the police, and the result has been mayhem here. We saw over the weekend in Los Angeles this actor for General Hospital killed in a dispute in L.A. The widow, I'm not sure if it's a girlfriend or wife, speaking out about it. And every time we see this, but you have to understand, this was a directive, like a 20-page directive from the Attorney General that I happen to have in front of me, talking about what they want cops to do and essentially not do. And it was based on the premise, cops are racist. They're going to go after kids now of color because they couldn't go after adults anymore around the marijuana thing. That's what triggered it. The governor still doesn't see the problem. He says 99% of the days were just great. They were spectacular at the Jersey Shore. It's making national news, particularly Wildwood went to a state of emergency, civil unrest. I had the mayor on today in Philadelphia, was the person who used this. And this is the type of thing that's coming to your community if it already isn't there. Some of it are the progressive DAs, but this came right out of this directive that's anti-cop. And the kids that are engaged in this are not kids of color usually. A number of them are relatively affluent, doing stuff in a place like Ocean City. I'm just wondering, have you heard the brand of Ocean City, New Jersey nationally? That people literally from around the world come here. Now, it's non-alcohol publicly. I mean, you can have alcohol in your home, but the restaurants can't serve it. You can't have it anywhere else. And it's never been a place that felt oppressive with police presence and all that. But the last 2 summers, they did a lot to curtail this. I think they let it go this year to see what would happen Memorial Day starting it. And the results are just shocking people. New York Post even had big articles about it. How could that happen in a place where its brand is America's family resort? Any of these surveys, any of these groups, there's like 50 of them that award this annually. Almost routinely, Ocean City, New Jersey wins that. Now, it's also the site of a dispute with progressives over the whales. You may have heard about this nationally, where they want to put in these gigantic skyscraper windmills and the battle that's going on, dead whales washing up dolphins and the like. And Phil Murphy, progressives, they're the people, again, involved in this. And it's a huge multi-billion dollars of fights over this. So far, they've been stopped. But here, they strike again. And if it can happen in a town like this, I can't convey to you the shock. You know, if this happens in Chicago, notorious nationally, even Philadelphia, we have a progressive DA extreme, even New York. People say this is horrible, it's worse than it's ever been, but they don't go, oh my God, you know, what the heck has happened here? But here on the Jersey Shore, it's happening in Ocean City, Wildwood, and other places. Now they want a law. If you can imagine, you had people wearing various sort of ski masks in the stabbing incident in Ocean City, the people that were involved in the stabbing in like 90-degree heat. It is stunning people. It's a place where you just don't hear about things. And what is the one wrinkle here? It all goes back to a large measure. Telling the cops, you're going to be in big trouble, buddy, if you start fooling around with these teenagers as far as exerting any kind of authority around marijuana, alcohol use, or even just moving on. The mayor of Wildwood told me part of it, you had fights in Wildwood, people fighting with the cops and each other, and hundreds of people forming a circle filming it, some of them claiming to be influencers. Various podcasts, various websites, making tapes and going from fight to fight, so much so they had to shut down the entire town. So what's happened here is something that can happen anywhere in America. But you would think, like I wanted to ask them, where are places where you would go, wow, this happened there? Ocean City, New Jersey is one of them. You know, no matter how bad it gets in New York, come on, it's New York, it's Chicago, it's Philadelphia, the blue cities and all that, LA now too. But when it happens in certain places, you say to yourself, what's the recourse? When are people going to wake up here? How could you take away the authority of cops? It's a whole long list of directives, of page after page. Any cop would be insane to get into it with these teenagers. All right, phone lines are easy enough. 833, the number 4, Valdes, 833-482-5337. You can get on board. Love to hear from you this hour. Got a lot more. And if you've ever had a vasectomy, jump in. If you want to use a different name, that's fine. Would you consider deactivating the vasectomy? How many times can you do this? What kind of toll? And can the government really encourage people enough? How much incentive would it take if you've had a vasectomy to go back so that you can help the birth rates? I mean, I'm surprised South Korea is having that much trouble. All righty, 833, the number 4, Valdes.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdes. Call now, 833-4-VALDES. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDES. That's Valdes with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDES. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDES. That's Valdes with an S.
Hey, that's exactly right. Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich tonight. Jump in at 833, the number 4, Valdes. A couple of things. This Wildwood, Ocean City, New Jersey. I mean, this brand in Ocean City, New Jersey, when you are dubbed America's Family Resort, alcohol-free, I think the Methodists founded the town, but it's not oppressive. It's not that type. It's a modern, glowing boardwalk and a lot of activity and all that. It's perfect. How in the world do you end up with this? When I told you what they've been facing due to this directive from New Jersey, and then Wildwood and a couple of other towns had just such violence, they called it civil unrest, had to shut down the town. Think national emergency. That's what they cited. How do we get to that point? Well, you tell cops that they are beyond suspect and what's going to happen to them if these little punks say anything about this. And again, this started out as this directive, cops are racist, but the kids we're dealing with in a place like Ocean City are often white and above middle class, and they're engaging in this, and they can't stop them. They can't stop the roots of it, and it just feeds off itself. I can't, I'm trying to think of other places in the country where you would go, well, that just wouldn't happen there. They wouldn't allow it. Ocean City is one of them, and they are struggling to know what to do. And you have the governor, who's stone cold progressive, saying 99% of the Jersey Shore, it was great. What a kickoff to Memorial Day. People are appalled. They're not taking their young kids up on the boardwalk with them. This is a billion-dollar economy in Cape May County where all these places are located. And each one of them, even though they're, only strung out over X number of miles, is different. Wildwood is, like the place says, it's rowdy. Senior week, that kind of thing. Ocean City is more affluent. But you get that pedigree. If you're number one in something, think about that. Think about how much that means. America's family resort, that people go there. That's what they're looking for year after year. And you start having stabbings and people standing there in front of people, shoplifting, just eating candy and saying, what are you going to do about it? And then fights spreading up and down the boardwalk in chaos. You're not going to be America's family resort for too long. What action do you take? I told you what the restraints are. And again, this always comes back to the police, racist, the police. And these are not kids of color. It has nothing to do with that. They screw up everything. Progressives, look, on the marijuana thing, the people of New Jersey wanted this. I know there are some downsides. People still can cite. I get that. But people voted overwhelmingly. They're adults. They wanted the ability to smoke marijuana. Okay. Why then would progressives swoop in, a win, you could argue, and screw it up by attacking the cops and making it about teenagers and setting them loose on what we've seen, this type of free fall destruction? Because this is what progressivism does. And again, people in the state want marijuana. I'm all on board. I like referendum. I think in a place like Pennsylvania, it'll pass over the next few years. If that's what the vote is, I'm all on board with that. I know some of the downsides. I know some of the things. But imagine taking that victory for the will of the people, very libertarian with a small L, and then mixing it into this toxic brew that started the last couple of summers, where you have people principally at the Jersey Shore emboldened en masse to go wild in these places that are dependent upon their brand, their pedigree, to survive, to make money. You're talking big money. You're talking source of pride. A community, as I said, that's not old-fashioned. You wouldn't notice it in Ocean City, New Jersey, even though there's no drinking publicly, and turning into a debacle. I just offer this as a classic case, not liberalism, but progressivism. That's what you get. That's what's occurring here. All right, I'm coming to everybody. Here's how you get in with Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich. 833, the number 4 Valdes, 833-482-5337. Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich Valdes on America at Night.
Rich Valdes, who, again, will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdes.
Dom Giordano sitting in for Rich at 833-482-5337. You get to me. Let's go to Diane in Chicago, WGN. Hey, Diane, welcome in.
Oh, hi. What is your name again, your first name?
It's Dom, D-O-M with an M. Often,
Dom. Okay.
I get crazy when people say Don because it's a common thing. It's Dom, D-O-M, Diane.
Dom, like Dominic. Okay.
Yes.
Well, anyway, I used to listen to Jim Bohannon as well. So anyway, and as we're talking now, this won't be on here on WGN until 3 a.m., 3:30 a.m. So right now is the equivalent where I cannot hear your show until 1 a.m. Just, you know that, right?
I gotcha. Okay.
Right. So too bad it's not on earlier so I can listen in real time. So which leads me to this thing to say that I don't know exactly what you were discussing earlier in the part of the show, except now that I've been listening to your talking about this Ocean City thing, which I don't understand it. I'm very anti-marijuana myself, and I don't like that it's even legal. But anyway, that's another story.
Okay.
I was thinking that I'm not a lawyer, and most people aren't lawyers, but I'm interested in law and following cases, and that it's just sort of a hobby. But of course, there's nothing being. We don't know except you go online and look at the transcripts or whatever what the lawyers said and what went on, because there's no photo filming in there. And I don't have a computer anyway. I go to the library just to give you too much information here. But anyway, I think that the jury will get instructed in it tomorrow, and I bet by news time, prime time news, they'll have their decision. I think maybe it'll be in favor of Mr. Trump. But there's so many convolutions. If you read about Cohen himself, he now is remorseful and admits, and he was, he took a pathway in his life, early on. You hear about this saying, you lie down with the dogs, you wake up with fleas. But he liked that life of his uncle ran a big catering event.
Well, look, Diane, I don't think we're going to get it tomorrow night.
Okay.
But I do think in a few days, I do think it's going to be a hung jury. Thank you, Diane. Thanks for the call, though. Tommy in Charleston, West Virginia, WCHS. Hey, Tommy, good evening. Hey, Tommy, are you there? All right, thanks, Tommy. By the way, great producing here on America at Night. Harvard story out. Harvard now, after all of their nonsense during these encampments, etc., is not going to weigh in on public matters anymore. Oh, why would that be? Isn't that what they're in business for? Taking the methodology of the classics of Western civilization, then applying it to today. Isn't that what they're supposed to be teaching students? That's what a college education was to me. Where I am in the Philadelphia area, Drexel, which is a school that may not be known that well nationally, but on the East Coast, known, you would think, as a business school, has an encampment of the anti-Israel people. They're demanding that Starbucks be shut down. They're demanding that two Jewish organizations, Hillel and Shabbat, which are big national Jewish social groups, be kicked off of campus. They're demanding that the college not use Hewlett-Packard for some reason for all their digital and copying and all that. And they're demanding that the college president cut his salary by 60%, and that money being given to various Palestinian causes. All right, I think the odds, maybe they would get rid of Starbucks. No, I don't think so. Cutting the college president, though, is probably making $500,000 plus, maybe $1 million, by 60%. All right, so the encampments are still going on, even though it's quieted down a little bit. Harvard now not going to weigh in on public matters. Yeah, they've been embarrassed, but they don't care. They're still the biggest guy in the room. The endowment is still, I believe, north of $58 million or so. It's ridiculous. Republicans have to do a better job of making the case. How is it that college costs this much? How is it we continue to finance this? Just look at the results. But they have been stung to oust the president, the plagiarism charges, among other things, in several of their ranks. And several people have shown themselves well, at least Stefanik, particularly with those three college presidents. But what a cowardly, isn't their mission to engage in public matters? All right, let's go to Lena in Alliance, Ohio, WNIR. Lena, welcome to America at Night.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I just had a question about the Ocean City, because I'm not up to date on that. What was the lady talking about before me about the whole marijuana thing?
Oh, okay. What happened is Jersey became one of the states, Lena, that passed adult recreational marijuana is fine. So the people that are progressives, the governor and his attorney general, said the cops, we know they're racist, we know they're locking people up unnecessarily. They can't do it to adults of color now, Latino and black. They're going to do it to teenagers, young adults. So they issued all these directives that effectively stop cops from any kind of authority when they come upon unruly teenagers who might be high, might be drinking, etc. And what's happened is now a critical mass happens when we get to the summer in these shore communities, and they're being overrun. Ocean City, New Jersey, constantly, you could look it up, is voted the #1 family resort in America, and they had stabbings and other events over the weekend.
So I Googled a little bit about it, and it said kids like 18 and under, or teenagers shouldn't be unsupervised from 11 to 6 a.m.
Yes.
In Ocean City. But I think it all boils down to is the government is making drugs legalized because it is a way for them to continue out their agenda without people being aware and noticing because people are high or they're drinking. So I feel like it's a little bit more deeper than what people see it as. Mm-hmm. The children and the generation that is coming up now don't have a sense of responsibility or respect or self-control or anything like that. And the government, to me, is making it to where the parents and the police are being disabled by the laws to give our kids a foundation on how we grew up.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. Thank you, Lena. Look, the idea of governments wanting to have bread in circuses. Remember that, ancient Roman times? Just give them the food for now, give them the Colosseum, give them that type of stuff. Yeah, that's operational, but I do think this is more of a worldview. And the worldview is cops bad, cops racist. I have the document here, and it's stunning that the Attorney General would tell the cops of the lengths they're to go to rather than engage with these kids and exert their authority to break them up, to say, go home, we're going to call your parents. The chief of police in Avalon told me, in a place like Avalon, Jersey Shore there, they have small bridges, kids jump into the water, not necessarily that deep. Cops would see it and say, yo, come on, knock it off, and or take them home to the parents, and or, if need be, do something else. And they're ignored in this. And there's a fear, particularly with social media, particularly with everybody filming. You see some of these incidents over the weekend. By the way, too, some of the incidents you'll see on social media from the Jersey Shore, they illustrate how hard it is to handcuff someone. You can have a big, brawny cop even, and a smaller person. You see on TV, handcuffs go on right away. No, not if someone's struggling, not something like that. Imagine being filmed by a crowd surrounding you of a couple hundred that wants to get at you, that are screaming things, threatening to sue you, whatever. Are you going to want to engage too much in that? And if you don't engage and do it early on, you know what happens. It builds up. It gets out of control. It's a simple thing. So why do we do this? Well, again, it's progressivism. The statements from the governor, he didn't think anything much happened. It was a beautiful Memorial Day up and down the Jersey Shore. And again, you have one of those places whose very livelihood, identity, Ocean City, New Jersey, you don't get to be #1. I'd have to look up the other towns and all that. America's family resort. When you get to be #1 year and year after, something like that, you know, where people want to take their families. We've all had that experience, right? Growing up, the family vacation, a couple weeks at the shore, mountains, wherever you go. That is a great pedigree. How do you ruin that? Well, exactly what's going on right now. That's how you do it. All right, here's how you get in easily. 833, the number 4, Valdes. You get in with Dom Giordano, sitting in for Rich.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdes. Call now, 833-4-VALDES. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDES. That's Valdes with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdes.
Hey, that's exactly right. Honored to be in. Dom Giordano pinch hitting for Rich tonight. 833, the number 4, Valdes. Come on now, before we leave the show tonight, nobody out there has had a vasectomy. The South Korean government, if you were there, would pay you a lot to reverse that vasectomy. How much would it take for people to be engaging in that? I don't know if you have to prove then you impregnated somebody or not, but the birth rate is exceedingly low. And as a result, that's where we are. All right, let's go to David in San Francisco here on the Rich Valdes America at Night. Hey, David, welcome in.
Oh, how are you, Dom? You know, I don't know if you realize the opportunity that you just missed with that dropped caller. Tommy, can you hear me? You missed it, man. You missed it.
Well, thank you. I will take a note on that talk radio fodder. Thank you, David.
So I was interested in the Trump trial. You realize, of course, that Trump suckered the American taxpayers into paying for his mistress or his fling, his tryst. He wrote Stormy Daniels off on his taxes. And the very first witness was a guy that laid out the accounting method. Mm-hmm. And Stormy was supposed to get $130,000, and then Michael Cohen was going to get another $30,000. Then Trump doubled it, and he added a bunch more. So he ended up writing off $420,000 to us, the taxpayers, mm-hmm. and so he magnified it so that he didn't have to pay any taxes, and it's layers of fraud.
And what would you think the penalty for something like that would be? Let's just say all that without getting into minutia. What's the usual penalty for that? Do you go to jail for 100 years?
That's the difference between whether it was calculated or whether it was an accident. If it was an accident, it would be a misdemeanor. But if it's a felony, yeah, you can get. We're talking nearly $500,000 worth of fraud.
I don't think you're going to go to jail on a felony in a situation like that under almost any circumstance. That would be my point. Now, you can differ. But even if that were fully the case in the manner you presented it, David, I don't think you're going to jail on that. Why not make that the case then versus this other unlawful conduct and the election? Why not just make that the case?
Well, are the jurors anonymous because of death threats? Is Trump stirring up death threats against the judge's daughter? Is Trump stirring up death threats against the judge? The jury has to be anonymous because of death threats.
Well, I didn't say anything about them being anonymous, but you don't think you would be better served for your side of this with Trump if we had a judge that didn't have a daughter who has raised in the neighborhood of 90 million plus for various major Democrat Senate candidates, et cetera, and still does that today and provides a lot of the services? Wouldn't we be better served by a judge that looks on the surface to be outside that?
Well, if you go to New York City and you realize how Trump has ripped off people for 50 years. He wouldn't pay the doorman. He wouldn't pay the elevator.
Yeah, but David, I asked you, can you answer that? Would we be better served by a judge who is not compromised in this manner?
I think we're served just fine because...
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. I mean, I think it's an obvious question. Okay? It's an obvious question. Of course, Mershon, this isn't by happenstance. With the daughter should not be in this situation. And gagging Trump in this situation. Look, he's sure is under as much pressure by various connections in New York City, where people think democracy is at stake, particularly these two lawyers. God knows the thought pattern if they come back and they didn't convict Trump. I can make the argument the pressure is probably even more enormous. More people will know them in that regard. All right, final calls of the night coming up. Here's how you get in. 833, the number 4, Valdes.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdes.
America at Night with Dom Giordano pinch hitting. And tomorrow night, we'll have a lot of jury instructions tomorrow night to take a look at. But in addition to that, Colorado is going to use drones to respond to 911 calls. And I was just telling the producer that in Philadelphia, it used to be you had to respond to a call and be there in under 2 minutes. Now reduced to responding to 911 calls with drones, as if technology is going to bail us out of this situation. And I'm telling you, what's going on at the Jersey Shore, you're going to see more in coming days wherever you are, is not just some rowdiness that happened over Memorial Day. There's an actual root to this, and 17 towns are now in a pitch battle with the governor and his attorney general to say, you're going to have to remove these sanctions placed on cops. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to deal with these crowds of kids. You got this toxic mix of people going after the cops, social media, everybody with a phone, and people just living for this on the boardwalk. No parenting or parenting, people lawyered up, not my son, not my daughter. You put it all together, and you end up with a place like, look, I know across the country, you may have only vaguely heard of Ocean City, New Jersey. If you Google it, you look it up, you hear it more, though. It is pristine as far as its reputation. And that is $1 billion thing. When you get a brand and something is lucrative, of people investing all that money to go on vacation to a place, and they identify, I can bring my family there. It's going to be safe. It's going to be beautiful. Yeah, it's going to be pricier because of Bidenomics, but that's what I want to do. And that starts to get iffy, and people can't do that. That is huge. So I will let you know over the next couple nights. I told you when they had a seagull problem, what they did. They went crazy. They stopped it. Can you stop something like this when you get these sort of developments? Very, very difficult. So tomorrow, the trial, the jury instructions are going to be really interesting to see what this judge says. Remember, some of these jurors want something to hang on so that they can duke it out. They probably are not convinced that Trump has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. But the pressure of the other 7 or 8 that want to convict Trump at all cost is going to be ferocious. Tomorrow is a critical day. I think by Friday, we'll know the fate, and this is going to determine, in my view, a lot of what happens in the upcoming election. Hey, thanks to Alex and crew for producing tonight. It's always a pleasure to sit in for Rich Valdes here on America at Night.